The Thanksgiving turkey sat at the center of the mahogany table like a peace offering that no one intended to honor. Eleanor Vance sat at the far end, adjusted her pearls, and watched the steam rise from the gravy boat. In the soft glow of the chandelier in Julian's Upper East Side apartment, she felt less like a guest of honor and more like a piece of vintage furniture. Functional once, perhaps, but now mostly just in the way of the modern aesthetic. Julian, her only son, was mid-sentence, his voice carrying that sharp, caffeinated edge of a man who traded in billions but forgot to trade in kindness. He was leaning toward a business associate he'd invited, a man named Marcus, who had spent the last 20 minutes checking his Rolex. "The market is shifting toward automated logistics," Julian said, his hand slicing through the air. "If you aren't thinking 5 years ahead, you're already 10 years behind." Eleanor cleared her throat softly. "Actually, Julian, the bottleneck in logistics isn't the automation. It's the predictive latency in the data silos. If the AI can't account for the human variable in the final mile, the efficiency drops by 12% regardless of the hardware." The table went silent. Not the respectful silence of people considering a valid point, but the awkward, heavy silence of people waiting for an elderly relative to stop rambling. Cassandra, Julian's wife, offered a tight, cosmetic smile. She reached over and patted Eleanor's hand, a gesture that felt more like a redirection than an affection. "That's lovely, Eleanor. But let's leave the shop talk to the boys today, shall we? Why don't you tell Marcus about those prize-winning hydrangeas you grew in Vermont this summer? I'm sure he'd find that much more refreshing." Eleanor felt the heat crawl up her neck. She was 68. She had spent 35 years as the head of medical data analytics at one of the most prestigious research hospitals in Boston. She had pioneered algorithms that identified patterns in cellular decay before Julian had even learned how to tie his own silk ties. And yet here she was, being told to talk about flowers so the boys could discuss the world she had helped build. "The hydrangeas were blue this year," Eleanor said quietly, withdrawing her hand. The soil acidity was just right. She caught the eye of her granddaughter Maya, who was sitting across from her. Maya was 14, wearing oversized headphones around her neck and looking at her father and mother with a quiet, observant disdain. Maya didn't say anything, but she gave her grandmother a tiny, barely perceptible nod. It was the only moment of genuine connection Eleanor had felt all day. As the dinner progressed, the conversation drifted toward the Vermont problem. This was how Julian and Cassandra referred to Eleanor's life. To them, her 3-bedroom farmhouse was an asset to be liquidated, and her independence was a liability to be managed. "Mom," Julian said, his tone shifting into that practiced, caring resonance he used when he was about to sell a client a bad deal. "Cassandra and I have been looking at some brochures for the Gables. It's a luxury retirement community just outside the city. They have a 24-hour concierge, a private chef, and a medical wing that's top tier. We think it's time to think about the next phase." "The next phase usually involves a casket, Julian," Eleanor replied, her voice steady. "I'm not quite there yet." "It's about safety," Cassandra chimed in, her voice like honey poured over glass. "The stairs in Vermont are steep, and you're so isolated. What if something happens? Besides, the market for property in your county is peaking. If we sell now, you'll have a massive nest egg for your sunset years. Julian can even manage the portfolio for you. He'd do it pro bono, of course." Eleanor looked at her son. She saw the flick of his eyes toward Marcus. She saw the tension in his jaw. She realized then that this wasn't about her safety. Julian's hedge fund had been rumored to be struggling after the tech bubble correction in the spring. He didn't want her in a luxury community for her comfort. He wanted the equity in the Vance estate to bolster his own crumbling credit lines. He was trying to manage his mother like a distressed asset. "I'll think about it," Eleanor said, a phrase she knew would satisfy them long enough to finish the meal. But as she lay in the guest room that night, a room that felt sterile and smelled of expensive candles she didn't like, Eleanor didn't think about retirement homes. She waited until the house was silent, the only sound the muffled hum of the New York traffic 30 floors below. She sat up, reached into her sensible leather handbag, and pulled out a nondescript high-performance laptop. She didn't use the house Wi-Fi. She used a secure, encrypted hotspot. The screen glowed, illuminating the sharp lines of her face. She opened a private terminal. An icon flashed in the corner, a stylized Greek shield. Project Aegis. A chat window popped up immediately. "A. Thorne. You're late. I thought the turkey had claimed another victim." Eleanor smiled, her fingers flying across the keys with a speed that would have terrified Julian. E. Vance. The turkey was fine. The company was overseasoned with arrogance. Did the final stress test on the rural hospital dataset finish? A. Thorne. 100% completion. Eleanor, the results are staggering. The AI identified the stroke markers in the Vermont pilot group 46 hours before the first symptom. We didn't just meet the threshold, we shattered it. Omnicare's legal team called twice today. They want to sit down before the new year. E. Vance. Let them wait, Aris. A billionaire's interest only grows with silence. Keep the server side encrypted. And Aris? A. Thorne. Yeah? E. Vance. Make sure you've scrubbed my name from the public-facing metadata. To the world, you are the face of this. To my family, I am just a woman who grows blue hydrangeas. Eleanor closed the laptop. She walked to the window and looked out at the city. She knew what Julian was planning. She knew about the debt. She knew he had already drafted the power of attorney papers. She'd seen them tucked into his briefcase while she was looking for a pen earlier that afternoon. He thought she was a fading light. He didn't realize she was the sun, and he was just a planet beginning to drift out of orbit. The next morning, the harrowing began. It started with small comments from Cassandra over breakfast. Oh, Eleanor, you forgot your sweater on the chair. Is your memory doing all right? My aunt started forgetting things like that right before she... Well, you know. Then it was Julian, over coffee. I noticed you were up late, Mom. The light was under your door at 2 a.m. Sleep disturbances are a major red flag for cognitive decline. We really should move up that appointment with the specialist. They were gaslighting her. It was a clinical American cruelty, the attempt to convince a person they were losing their mind so they would hand over their keys. Eleanor played along. She tilted her head, looked slightly confused, and thanked them for their concern. She let them believe the trap was working. On December 20th, Eleanor packed her bags to return to Vermont for the holidays. We'll be down on the 31st to celebrate New Year's with you, Julian promised, kissing her cheek. We'll bring the papers then, just to get the logistics out of the way so we can start the year fresh. I'll be waiting, Eleanor said. As her car service pulled away, she watched them standing on the sidewalk, the golden couple of New York. They looked so successful. They had no idea that the logistical expert they were trying to swindle was currently the majority shareholder of the most sought-after medical AI startup in the Western Hemisphere. Back in Vermont, the air was crisp and smelled of pine and incoming snow. Eleanor didn't go to a specialist. She went to her study. For the next 10 days, while the world prepared for champagne and fireworks, Eleanor Vance prepared for war. She met with Aris Thorne in a quiet diner on the outskirts of Burlington. Aris was 30, wore hoodies, and had a mind like a diamond, hard and clear. He had been a student of hers decades ago, the one she'd pulled out of a failing grade because she saw the logic in his chaos. They're going to announce the acquisition on the 28th, Aris said, pushing a folder across the table. Omnicare is offering $2.2 billion, $1.2 billion in cash, the rest in stock. Because of your initial seed investment and your intellectual property contribution, your personal take-home, after taxes, and my share is approximately $1.1 billion. Eleanor didn't gasp. She didn't celebrate. She simply took a sip of her black coffee. And the PR rollout? It's going to be a quiet acquisition first. A blurb in the tech journals on the 28th, then the major press release on New Year's morning. Your name will be listed as the founder and lead architect. Perfect, Eleanor said. On the 31st, Julian and Cassandra are coming to my house to tell me I'm too old to live alone. I want them to see it on the news while they are holding the pen they want me to use to sign my life away. But then the first twist happened. On the evening of December 27th, Eleanor's phone rang. It was Maya, her granddaughter. The girl was crying. Grandma, I'm in the hallway. They're shouting, Maya whispered. Who's shouting, honey? Dad and Mom. Dad's saying the Vance Fund is frozen. He said if you don't sign the papers on New Year's, we're going to lose the apartment. He said he'd find a way to make the judge declare you incompetent if he has to. Grandma, he's scary. He sounds like a different person. Eleanor's heart tightened, not for herself but for the girl. Maya, listen to me. I want you to go to your room and pack a small bag. Just the things you love. Can you do that? Why? Because, Eleanor said, her voice turning from a grandmother's comfort to a CEO's command. The next phase is starting sooner than they think, and I'm not going to let you stay on a sinking ship. Eleanor hung up. She realized Julian wasn't just greedy, he was desperate. And a desperate man wouldn't wait until the 31st if he felt the walls closing in. She was right. At 6 a.m. on December 28th, the day the acquisition was to be quietly noted in the financial journals, Eleanor heard the sound of tires crunching on the frozen gravel of her driveway. She didn't get out of bed. She opened her laptop. The headline on the Wall Street Journal digital edition had just gone live. Omnicare acquires startup Aegis Alpha for $2.2 billion. Mystery founder revealed as retired data genius. Beneath the headline was a photo Eris had provided. Not a corporate headshot, but a photo of Eleanor in her garden in Vermont, holding a blue hydrangea, looking directly into the camera with a look of cool, calm intelligence. The doorbell rang. It wasn't a polite ring. It was a frantic, repeated pounding. Eleanor put on her silk robe, smoothed her hair, and walked down the stairs. She looked at the security camera. It was Julian. His coat was unbuttoned, his face was pale, and he was holding a stack of legal documents in a trembling hand. He hadn't seen the news yet. He had driven through the night from New York, fueled by panic and the need to steal from his mother before his own world collapsed. Eleanor opened the door. "Julian," she said, her voice as cool as the morning frost. "You're early for New Year's." "Mom," he gasped, pushing his way inside. "We don't have time for pleasantries. The firm, there's been a complication. I need you to sign these trust transfer papers right now. It's for your own protection, I swear. If the creditors come after the Vance name, they'll take this house. If you sign this over to a subsidiary I've set up, it's safe. Please, do it for the family." He shoved the papers and a pen onto the kitchen island. Eleanor didn't look at the papers. She looked at the television mounted on the kitchen wall. She picked up the remote and turned it on. "And in breaking financial news," the anchor said, "the tech world is buzzing over the $2.2 billion acquisition of Aegis Alpha. The founder, Eleanor Vance, has remained a dark horse in the industry until today. Analysts say her predictive AI is the holy grail of modern medicine." Julian froze. His head slowly turned toward the screen. He saw the photo of his mother. He saw the number, $2.2 billion. The pen fell from his hand, clattering onto the hardwood floor. "Mom?" he whispered, his voice cracking. What is that?" Eleanor leaned against the counter, crossing her arms. "That, Julian, is my hydrangea money. Now, would you like some coffee? Or should we talk about that incompetency hearing you were planning?" The silence that followed was the loudest thing Eleanor had ever heard. The silence in the kitchen was thick enough to suffocate. Julian stood paralyzed, his gaze darting between the flickering television screen and the woman he thought he knew. For 42 years, he had seen Eleanor as a satellite orbiting his son, a source of comfort, a holiday cook, a quiet background presence. Now, the satellite had revealed itself to be a supernova. $2.2 billion? Julian whispered, the words catching in his throat like dry ash. He looked at the legal papers he'd just shoved at her, papers meant to strip her of a house worth maybe $700,000. It was like trying to rob a bank with a plastic spoon, only to find out the bank was an impregnable fortress. Eleanor didn't answer immediately. She walked to the kettle, her movements fluid and calm. "The coffee will be ready in a moment, Julian. You look like you need it. You've had a long drive and a very long night of planning." The sound of the front door opening again startled him. Cassandra walked in, her heels clicking sharply on the hardwood. She was breathless, her phone clutched in a white-knuckled grip. "Julian, did you see? The news? My alerts are going crazy. Every PR firm in the city is calling me asking if I'm related to—" She stopped dead. She saw the TV. She saw Eleanor. Then she saw the papers on the counter. Cassandra's professional instincts, honed in the shark-infested waters of New York high society, shifted gears with a whirring sound. The pitying expression she usually wore for Eleanor vanished, replaced by a radiant, predatory beam. "Eleanor! Oh my goodness!" Cassandra rushed forward, attempting to wrap her arms around Eleanor's shoulders. Eleanor sidestepped her with the grace of a matador. "We were so worried. Why didn't you tell us? We could have helped you navigate the press. This is a family triumph." "A family triumph," Eleanor repeated, pouring the hot water. "Interesting phrasing, Cassandra. Especially since 10 minutes ago, Julian was telling me the family name was a liability and I needed to sign over my life to save it." Julian finally found his voice, though it was an octave higher than usual. "Mom, You have to understand, I was under a lot of pressure. I didn't know you had this. If I'd known, I would have structured my fund differently. I was trying to protect you from the fallout of my business. You were trying to protect yourself from your own incompetence, Julian, Eleanor said, turning to face them. Her eyes, usually soft and maternal, were now the color of flint. I've been reading the SEC filings on your fund for months. I knew about the margin calls. I knew about the creative accounting you were using to hide the losses. I was waiting for you to come to me as a son, to tell me you were in trouble and ask for help. Instead, you came as a predator. Twist 2, the legal trap, the reverse power of attorney. Julian's face turned a mottled red. Look, okay, I'm in a hole, but this changes everything. With your liquidity, we can recapitalize the Vance Fund. We can turn it into a family office. You're 68, Mom. You don't want to be dealing with board meetings and tax structures. I'm a professional. I can manage the $1.1 billion for you. We'll be the most powerful family in the city. He reached for the papers on the counter, intending to tear them up, but Eleanor's hand got there first. Actually, Julian, I'd like you to look at page 4 of the trust transfer documents you brought me, she said. Julian frowned. What? I wrote those. It's a standard subsidiary transfer. Is it? Eleanor smiled. Last week, when you left your briefcase open in the guest room, I took the liberty of having Eris Thorne, who, as you saw on the news, is quite a brilliant mind, run a digital scan of your drafts. He's also a very talented coder. He managed to update the files on your encrypted cloud drive while you were sleeping. Julian's heart skipped a beat. He snatched the papers and flipped to page 4. His eyes widened as he read the fine print. It wasn't a transfer from Eleanor to Julian. It was a binding confession of liability. By bringing these papers to her and asking for her signature under the guise of protection, Julian had unwittingly brought a document that, if signed, would trigger an automatic audit of his own fund by a third-party legal team Eleanor had already retained. Furthermore, the subsidiary mentioned wasn't his. It was a shell company owned by Project Aegis. You hacked my cloud? Julian gasped, dropping the papers as if they were on fire. I didn't hack anything, Eleanor said calmly. I simply corrected the narrative. You wanted me to sign a lie. I prepared the truth. If you had succeeded in making me sign those today, Julian, you wouldn't have owned my house. You would have effectively signed a confession of fraud and handed me the keys to your entire firm. Cassandra backed away, her mind racing. Eleanor, this is cruel. He's your son. And I am his mother, Eleanor snapped, the first sign of heat in her voice. A mother he tried to gaslight into a nursing home so he could pay off his gambling debts with my floorboards. Do not talk to me about cruelty, Cassandra. You've spent 3 years treating me like a senile antique while you picked out which of my jewelry you'd wear to the Met Gala. The atmosphere in the kitchen had shifted from a family visit to a courtroom. Outside, the snow began to fall harder, wrapping the house in a white shroud. Climax 1, the showdown at the hearth. What do you want? Julian asked, his voice hollow. He slumped into a kitchen chair, the weight of his failed scheme finally crushing him. You've won. You're a billionaire. We're ruined. Are you going to call the feds? Is that the next phase? Eleanor sat across from him. She looked at him, not as the CEO of a tech giant, but as the boy she had once stayed up with when he had the croup. I don't want to see you in prison, Julian, she said softly. But I also won't allow you to continue living a lie. The Vance Fund is dead. By noon today, the news of my acquisition will trigger a morality clause in your major investors' contracts. They'll see the discrepancy between your mother's success and your fund's failure. They will pull their money. Julian put his head in his hands. I'll lose everything. The apartment, the cars, the reputation. You'll lose the things, Eleanor corrected. You've forgotten who you are without them. And that is why I made a deal with the board at Omnicare this morning. Cassandra perked up, her eyes glinting with a desperate hope. A deal? You're going to bail him out? Eleanor ignored her. I've agreed to the acquisition on one condition. I am establishing a non-profit wing of Aegis Alpha called the Vance Rural Initiative. We will be placing diagnostic AI units in every underserved clinic in the Appalachian Trail and the Midwest. She paused, looking Julian dead in the eye. And they need a logistics coordinator, someone who knows how to move assets, how to manage supply chains, and how to work 16-hour days for a modest salary of $60,000 a year. Julian looked up, stunned. You? You want me to work for a nonprofit? In the middle of nowhere? I want you to earn your soul back, Eleanor said. The job is in West Virginia. You start on the 5th of January. If you accept, I will use my personal funds to settle your debts, privately, quietly, so you don't go to prison. I will pay for Maya's schooling, but you and Cassandra will live on that $60,000. No trust funds, no loans from me, no Upper East Side gala appearances. Cassandra let out a shrill, hysterical laugh. West Virginia? 60,000? Eleanor, you're joking. My shoes cost more than that. We can't live like that. Then don't, Eleanor said, her voice turning to ice. Julian can go to federal prison for the fraud he's committed in his fund, and you can see how much your shoes are worth in a bankruptcy court. The choice is yours. But Maya stays with me for the rest of the winter break. She's already packed her bags. She's upstairs. Julian looked at his wife, then at his mother. He saw the cold, hard reality of his situation. His mother wasn't just a billionaire. She was his judge. What about Maya? Julian asked. Maya stays with me until the summer, Eleanor said. She needs to see what a woman of substance looks like before she spends another year breathing the toxic air you two provide. She'll attend the local school here. She'll learn how to grow hydrangeas. And she'll learn how to code. Just then, the door at the top of the stairs opened. Maya stood there, her small suitcase in hand. She had been listening. She didn't look at her parents. She walked straight down the stairs and stood next to Eleanor. I want to stay, Dad, Maya said, her voice small but firm. I don't want to go back to the apartment. It's lonely there. That was the blow that finally broke Julian. He let out a ragged sob, hiding his face in his hands. Cassandra stood frozen, her social world crumbling around her. She looked at Eleanor with pure hatred, but Eleanor only met her gaze with a look of profound boredom. You have 1 hour to leave my house, Eleanor said, rising from the table. My lawyers will send the employment and debt settlement contract to your phones by this afternoon. If it's not signed by midnight, I withdraw the offer. As Julian and Cassandra stumbled out into the snow, their expensive SUV struggling to find traction on the icy driveway, Eleanor stood at the window, the third twist, the ghost in the machine. Maya stood beside her. Are you really going to help him, Grandma? Eleanor watched the taillights disappear. I'm going to give him the chance to be a man, Maya. Whether he takes it is up to him. She walked back to her laptop. She had one more message to send. E. Vance. Eris, Phase 2 is complete. They've left. Did you find the secondary accounts? A. Thorne. Yes. It's worse than we thought. Julian wasn't just losing money. He was being blackmailed by a firm called Stone Gray Holdings. They were the ones pushing him to take your house. Eleanor. Stone Gray is a subsidiary of Omnicare. Eleanor's hand paused over the keys. Her heart went cold. Twist 3 revealed the very company that had just bought her startup for $2 billion was the same company that had been trying to bankrupt her son to get to her assets for free. The acquisition wasn't a victory. It was a Trojan horse. Eleanor looked at the TV screen, where the Omnicare logo was being displayed alongside her face. She realized then that the war wasn't over. It had just moved to a much larger battlefield. Maya, Eleanor said, her voice a low whisper. Yes, Grandma? Go get your laptop. We have work to do. It seems my partners at Omnicare think I'm an old woman they can play with. Eleanor Vance looked out at the blizzard. She had $1.1 billion, a genius coder, and a granddaughter who was ready to learn. Omnicare thought they had bought her. They were about to find out they had simply invited the shark into their swimming pool. The snow in Vermont didn't just fall, it conquered. By the morning of December 30th, the Vance estate was a white fortress, but inside, the atmosphere was electric with the hum of high-end processors. Eleanor sat at the mahogany dining table, which had been transformed into a tactical command center. Maya sat across from her, her young face illuminated by the scrolling green lines of a network diagnostic tool Eris had taught her to use. Grandma, Maya whispered, her voice tinged with awe. I found it. The Stone Gray server. It's routing through a blind trust in the Cayman Islands, but the digital signature matches the internal legal department at Omnicare. They weren't just blackmailing Dad, they were harvesting his client list to facilitate the takeover. Eleanor didn't look up from her own screen. Her fingers moved with the rhythmic precision of a concert pianist. In the corporate world, Maya, People don't always buy what they can steal. Omnicare wanted my AI, but they didn't want to pay $2.2 billion for it. They tried to break Julian so he would force me to sign a distress sale. When I didn't break, they had to pay full price. But they still think they own the architect. A notification chimed. A video call request from Eris Thorne. Eleanor swiped the screen. Eris appeared, looking disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from 48 hours of digital warfare. Eleanor, it's confirmed. Omnicare's CEO, Sterling Vance, no relation to you, ironically, just booked a private slot on Financial Morning Live for tomorrow. He's going to announce the integration. He's going to claim that you are joining their board as a figurehead while they move the Aegis Alpha servers to their private paywalled cloud. Eleanor's lips curled into a thin, dangerous smile. He wants to turn my life-saving tool into a luxury subscription for the elite. He wants to bury the rural clinic initiative. What are we going to do? Eris asked. The contract is signed. The money is in escrow. The contract is signed, Eleanor agreed. But the narrative belongs to me. Eris, get me a secure line to Sarah Jenkins at 60 Minutes. Tell her I'm ready to give my first and only exclusive interview. And tell her I want it live, tomorrow morning. Same time as Sterling's announcement. Twist 4. The live decapitation New Year's Eve morning arrived with a biting chill. While Julian and Cassandra were likely packing their designer suitcases for a life in a West Virginia trailer park, Eleanor Vance was sitting in a makeup chair in a makeshift studio in her living room. The producer from 60 Minutes looked nervous. Ms. Vance, you realize that once we go live, there's no taking it back. Omnicare's lawyers are already sending cease and desist letters to the network. Let them, Eleanor said, checking her reflection. She looked every bit the grandmother. Soft gray hair, a navy cashmere sweater, a string of modest pearls. But her eyes were the color of a winter sea. I've spent 68 years being told when to speak. Today, I'm choosing the frequency. The red light on the camera flickered to life. Across the country, millions of viewers tuned in. In a high-rise in Manhattan, Sterling Vance, the CEO of Omnicare, sat in his glass office, watching the monitor with a smirk. He thought Eleanor was going to play the role of the grateful retiree. Ms. Vance, Sarah Jenkins began, her voice professional and sharp. The world is calling you the billionaire in the backyard. You've just sold your life's work for over $2 billion. Most people would be celebrating on a beach. Why are you here? Eleanor leaned forward, her face filling the screens of millions of American homes. I'm here, Sarah, because I made a mistake. I sold my heart to a company that only cares about the pulse of a stock ticker. In the Manhattan office, Sterling's smirk vanished. Omnicare bought Aegis Alpha, Eleanor continued, her voice steady and resonant. But they didn't buy me, and they didn't buy the silent equity of the American people. This AI was built on data from rural hospitals, from veterans, from mothers who couldn't afford a city specialist. It belongs to them. Are you suggesting the acquisition was a mistake? Sarah asked, leaning in. I'm suggesting it was a hostile takeover disguised as a handshake, Eleanor said. While Omnicare was negotiating with me, their subsidiary, Stone Gray Holdings, was actively trying to bankrupt my son to force my hand. I have the digital trail. I have the blackmail logs. And as of 5 minutes ago, they have been uploaded to every major news outlet in the country. The internet exploded. The invisible matriarch had just dropped a nuclear bomb on a Fortune 500 company on live television. But that's not why I'm truly here, Eleanor said, ignoring the chaos she knew was erupting in the background. I'm here to announce the Vance open source protocol. Before I signed the final transfer of the Aegis Alpha code, I created a fork, a separate evolved version of the AI. I've placed it in a public trust. It is free for any nonprofit hospital in the world to use. Forever. Twist 5. The debt buyout. The final lever. The studio was silent. Sarah Jenkins looked stunned. You gave away the technology you just sold for billions? I gave away the soul of it, Eleanor corrected. Omnicare has the hardware. They have the brand. But the brain is now public property. And as for the $1.1 billion in my bank account, I'm not keeping a penny of it. She took a deep breath. This was the moment she had prepared for since she saw the look in Julian's eyes on Thanksgiving. I have spent the last 48 hours buying, Eleanor said. Not houses, not yachts. I have bought the debt of 5,000 families in the state of Vermont whose homes were being foreclosed on by banks affiliated with Omnicare. And I have bought the predatory loans of a struggling investment firm called the Vance Fund. She looked directly into the camera, as if she could see Julian watching from a motel room on his way to West Virginia. Julian, she said, her voice softening just a fraction, you don't owe the banks anymore. You don't owe the blackmailers. You owe me. And your debt will be paid in service. To the rest of America. The Nen candle in my window is still lit. We are taking our health back. Climax 2. The New Year's resolution. The aftermath was a whirlwind. Omnicare's stock plummeted 40% in 2 hours. Sterling Vance was forced to resign by nightfall. The billionaire in the backyard had become a national hero, a symbol of the silver generation, fighting back against the predatory nature of modern capitalism. But as the sun began to set on New Year's Eve, the house in Vermont returned to its natural state. Quiet. The TV was off. The servers were humming at a lower, more peaceful frequency. Eris had messaged to say he was going to sleep for a week. Eleanor sat by the fireplace, a cup of tea in her hands. Maya was curled up on the rug, reading a book on data ethics. The doorbell rang. Eleanor didn't need a camera to know who it was. She opened the door. Julian stood there. He was alone. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his hair was a mess, and he looked smaller than he had in years. He didn't have a briefcase. He didn't have a contract. "Mom," he said. His voice was cracked, his eyes red. "The contract for West Virginia is on your phone, Julian," Eleanor said, not moving from the doorway. "Have you signed it?" Julian nodded. "I signed it an hour ago. I saw the interview." "And?" Julian looked down at his shoes that cost more than a month's rent for the people his mother had just saved. "I didn't know about Stone Gray. I thought I was just failing on my own. I thought I was a loser. I didn't realize I was a target." "We are all targets when we value the wrong things, Julian," Eleanor said. Julian looked up at her. For the first time in 20 years, he didn't look like a fund manager. He looked like her son. "Why did you buy my debt? You could have let me go to jail. I deserved it." "I bought it because I wanted you to be free to choose," Eleanor said. "In jail, you have no choices. In West Virginia, you have a choice every single morning, to be the man who takes or the man who gives. I'm betting on the man I raised, not the man New York turned you into." Julian stepped forward, and for the first time since he was a teenager, he hugged his mother. It wasn't a stiff, polite hug. He sobbed into her shoulder, a grown man finally shedding the weight of a decade of lies. Eleanor held him. She didn't say it was okay. It wasn't okay yet. But she held him. "Go get your things from the car," she said eventually, wiping a tear from her own eye. "Maya is inside. We have one last dinner together before the next phase truly begins." The final scene, the billionaire in the backyard. At midnight, the fireworks from the town square echoed through the valley. Eleanor, Julian, and Maya stood on the back porch, watching the flashes of color against the snow. Julian's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, looked at it, and then, in a move that made Eleanor's heart soar, he turned it off and put it back in his pocket without checking it. "Grandma?" Maya asked, leaning against Eleanor's side. "Yes, honey?" "What are we going to do tomorrow?" Eleanor looked out at her garden, buried under the snow. She thought about the millions of people who now had access to a tool that could save their lives. She thought about the clinics in West Virginia waiting for a man who finally knew the value of a hard day's work. "Tomorrow," Eleanor said, a sparkle of wit returning to her eyes, "I think I'm going to check on my hydrangeas. And then I think I might start working on a new code. I hear the educational system could use a little disruption." Maya laughed, a bright, clear sound in the winter night. Eleanor Vance, the woman the world tried to make invisible, stood in the center of her own life. Not a billionaire, not a victim, but a grandmother with a plan. The next phase had never looked brighter.